Where were you born?
In Martinsville, Indiana.
And how long did you live there?
I lived there till I was 9 or 10 years old.
Is that when you moved to Monticello?
No, we moved to Indianapolis at that time.
When did you move to Monticello?
I moved to Monticello in 1969.
And how old were you?
I was only 15 years old, I believe.
So how long have you lived in Monticello?
I've lived here for 40 years.
What was your occupation in Monticello when you first got a job?
I think 50.
Oh.
Yeah. Excuse me, now what was the question?
What was your occupation when you first started working in Monticello?
I actually worked as a meat cutter for A&P grocery store.
Okay. And how old were you when the tornado hit in April of 1974?
I was 20 years old.
20 years old. Were you married? Did you have children?
I was married, yes, and I had one child.
And where were you living at the time?
I was living, it was called Lamplighter Lane in East Monticello. It was on the east bank of the river.
And were you ever told that the tornado was going to hit, or?
No, we had no indication whatsoever. There was no warning devices or anything at that point in time in our area. It was just a normal day.
What were you doing that day?
That day, your grandmother and I had went to Rensselaer. We had been looking for housing. I was actually working in Rensselaer at A&P. And we'd been there all day long and looking for housing there so we could move there so we wouldn't have such a drive, because it was always an hour drive there and an hour drive home. We looked all day and didn't really find anything. We got home that afternoon. Michelle, which was our daughter, had gotten sick, had been coming down with something, and we didn't know what was wrong with her, and so we was worried about getting her to the doctor. And when we got back, it was actually early afternoon. We called the doctor, told him what the situation was, and tried to get her into the doctor. And so they told us to bring her in around 5 o'clock. When we got everything packed up, ready to go, I had walked outside, and I just had a real funny feeling that something was wrong. I don't know why. It was really quiet, very still. It was a very, very warm day. I went back in the house and told Carol, that's my wife, that I didn't think we was going to leave yet. Well, she was kind of in a panic, and she said, no, we have to go. Our appointment's at 5 o'clock. And I told her, I said, no. I said, I don't think we should go yet. We just need to stay home. And she didn't quite understand that, and I don't know why, but I just didn't want to leave because I didn't think something was right with the weather. Mm-hmm. So I went back outside and was kind of checking things out and listening and, looking around and stuff. And it was very, very still. You could have heard a pin drop. It was so quiet. And I actually heard just crackling kind of in the air. It was like lightning, kind of a lightning noise, but it was really just almost a crackling. I went back in the house and I told her, I said, grab Michelle. And I said, some blankets. And I said, I want you to go to the basement. Well, at that point in time, she didn't understand why I wanted her to go to the basement, but I just forced her to go down into the basement. Well, my mother and father didn't live but a half a block from us, or less, and I was kind of worried about them, and because they lived on a slab foundation, and so I started to go to their house to get them to come to our
Mm-hmm.
house so they could have a basement to get in because I knew it was a bad storm coming. I started to go out the door, and at that point in time, we had like screen doors. They were just wooden; they
Yeah.
weren't any
Mm-hmm.
glass or anything in them. And when I grabbed a hold of the door and went to open it, it ripped the door out of my hand,
Wow.
and it flew into the air. And so I was really close to the basement, so I went down into the basement. I threw a big heavy quilt over the top of them because we had in our basement we had windows that were just small windows that you could see that were
Mm-hmm.
facing to the west, which was where the tornado was actually approaching. Um, we I threw the blanket over them. Um, I was worried about my mom and dad because I could see mud and everything hitting up against those windows. The noise was just like everybody says you hear a freight train.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I really heard a freight train. What I heard was just a lot of debris and stuff hitting our house and places. Um, it lasted, it seemed like an eternity, but it was just a
Mm-hmm.
few seconds. It really was. It wasn't very long. Um, when it passed, I come out of the basement and had Carol and Michelle. Um, they came up and we had a couple of windows that were broke out and stuff. We weren't really damaged that bad at our
Mm-hmm.
house. We had, a garage that was damaged, had some trees down and stuff. Um, by that point in time, my mom and dad had made it to our house. And I had a little brother that was actually working across the river in town at a gas station. It was a part-time job for him after school and stuff. And he was like just changed the oil and stuff in cars and, service type of person. Um, my dad's car, he had a brand new Pontiac Bonneville. It was up on the rack and the oil was being changed for the first time. It had 3,000 miles on it. And when we got across the bridge, which we had to cross over a bridge
Mm-hmm.
over the river to get there. Well, my dad actually told me, he says, I don't think your brother made it. He said, I watched it all because my dad stood in his doorway of his house and watched the whole town just blow apart.
Oh wow.
He watched everything just blow apart. And he actually told me he was in World War II. And he said it looked like the bombing of Germany when he seen it. He said it was just unbelievable. And when we got up there, which when we crossed the bridge, there was power lines down and stuff. We could see there was a small factory. Well, I say small, it was quite big. There was a factory on the other side, which would be the east side in town, below the bridge. And it was completely gone. There was people in there working at that time, and it was completely almost just leveled. You could see that the gas lines had ruptured. There was fire and stuff shooting out of the ground pretty much there because it was just, it caught on fire. There was water lines and stuff broke. You could see the water in the fire. It was kind of amazing. But I had crossed the bridge and we got to where the gas station was, and there was nothing left of the gas station except for one little small area, and it actually ended up being the restroom. And my dad said, don't, think he's here. He said, I think he's under this rubble or something. Well, the guy that owned the gas station actually was a police officer. And so I told Dad, I said, let's go to the police station. I said, that's where he would have went
Mm-hmm.
if he, is okay. Well, when we got to the police station, my dad actually went before. We both were walking to the police station, which was actually about a block and a half from there. On the way there, I come across a bank, which was First National Bank in Monticello. The guard was there, and he was bleeding from his head and had some arms and stuff, blood on his arms and stuff. And I told my dad, I said, go on. I said, I'm going to help this guy. And I tried to get him to come with me. I said, we need to get you somewhere where you can get some help. He wouldn't leave because he was the guard. And he said, I can't leave this bank. He said, I'm the guard. And he said, I have to protect the bank. And so I kind of just helped him, get set down and make sure he was okay. And there were some other people that came along and stayed there with him and was kind of tending to him also. So I went on to the police station. My dad was already there, and my little brother was there. But in that room, he had gotten that room. The only room that stood in that whole place is where my little brother got,
Wow.
which was the bathroom, and that's the only thing that saved his life. But the whole town, from there, we had lots of family and friends. Um, we called it the National Homes District. It was over by the high school. Um, I worked my way over through there. I mean, there was just devastation everywhere. The courthouse was completely gone. We had a beautiful courthouse. It was totally destroyed. I mean, there was just nothing left of it, pretty much. Um, on my way there, there was different people that were, they were injured, but other people were taking care of them, and everybody came out. I mean, everybody just came out of the woodwork and was just helping. Neighbors were helping neighbors and everything. I did get to my wife's uncle's house first and found him there. Their house had twisted and was off the foundation, and it was just, I mean, it was a total loss. It was a mess, but everybody was okay. They had a basement. They had gotten the basement. And so from there, I went on over towards the National Homes where the other people that we knew that I wanted to check on, and got over there and didn't find a lot of people there because it was pretty much leveled over there. So there, for a while, we didn't know that everybody was safe. It wasn't until, a few hours later when I started back home. I had taken a flashlight with me, and they're a National Guard, and they were starting to get people like that into town. And I'd been in town for a long time and searching and just checking on people and things like that. And anyway, when I started home, a gentleman asked me, it was an emergency type person, wanted to know if he could have my flashlight. And I said, sure. I said, I'm going home. I said, I don't need it, And so I give it to him. I had another one at home. And so when I got ready to go to the bridge and go across, the National Guard had blocked all that off. And at that point in time was letting nobody even come into town, let alone go out. They didn't want me to go out. And so I tried to explain to them that I lived right across the bridge, and my daughter and my wife were there, and I was going to go across the bridge. My dad had already went home. Their house, just like mine, was still livable. We had no electricity, but it was livable. We went ahead and argued a little bit about whether I was going to go across or not. And finally, they told me that if I had to go across, go ahead. But on their authority, they was advising I didn't. Well, I went ahead and went across and went home. And that's, that. But found out a little bit later that morning, because it seemed like just night went into morning because we didn't sleep very much. It got really cold that night. All three, my wife and my daughter, all three got into bed together and cuddled up with blankets and everything to keep warm, because it actually got so cold that night it snowed. We got up the next morning, we had 1 inch of snow on the ground.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so from then, we found out that there had been a church bus that was coming across the bridge at the time the tornado hit, and all of them had went into the river. And so we kind of, went out and was looking around. And of course, we'd called, we didn't call anybody because we didn't have any phones. We were trying to figure out how we were going to get our daughter taken care of because she was pretty sick.
Yeah.
And so I was going to go into town and find out if I could go, get her to the hospital, get her to a doctor, someplace like that. I was on my way out, and my sisters had came in from the Indianapolis area. They worked their way through the country roads and stuff and the back roads and got close enough that they could get to our house. And so they offered to go ahead and take her, our daughter, and take her to Indianapolis and get her to see a doctor. And we chose to stay here, and so they went ahead and took Michelle and took her to Indianapolis with them to the doctor. Long story short, there she ended up having some type of a strep throat or something like that, and they got it all taken care of, and she was fine. But they kept her for 2 or 3 days. But my uncle, well, let's go back to the bridge. We found out that those people had gone on the bridge, and I went back and seen if there's anything I could do or whatever. And they said no, there was nothing we could do. They just had divers coming in and stuff like that. They located the van, and out of the 7 people, there was only one person that actually made it out of the van alive. And just downstream from us in the river, there was a bait shop. And I come to find out that the people at the bait shop had gone out after the storm and grabbed her. She was coming downstream and grabbed her out of the water and pulled her ashore.
Oh, wow.
And got her into the bait shop and got her some dry clothes and got her warm and stuff, and then got a hold of the authorities and stuff. And she was the only survivor out of the 7 in the bus. All the rest of them perished during the, they drowned or whatever. But yeah, pretty sad. I actually watched them pull the van out and everything, and some of the rescue and stuff. But there was nothing we really could do except for just clean up, and we, people with chainsaws and stuff. And my wife's uncle, that his house was totally destroyed. 2 days later, he shows up at my house, because I had a lot of trees and stuff down everywhere, and he showed up at my house with a chainsaw. And I said, why are you here? And he says, I got nothing else left. He said, I'm here to help you. And so, we just cleaned everything up and stuff, and you had to feel sorry for people because there was just nowhere for them to go. Everybody was at a loss. It was very devastating. And we found out later that actually it was 3 tornadoes come into one, and it was an F5 tornado that hit us. There was like a center one, and the other 2 come in and just joined it and made it a mile-wide tornado. Like I said, it was just, it was unreal. I mean, it was just hard to explain how bad it was. I later on went to work for REMC, White County REMC, which is an electric company. And just talking to some of my the employees there and stuff, the superintendent of the company, which this was downtown. This place was downtown, not very, it was a block and a half from the courthouse. He was actually headed to work because, like any storm, when it hits, it was coming from the west, so they were getting reports of outages and stuff because they went several miles to the west. Their system did. Well, he was getting reports of outages, so he was trying to get to the office to dispatch crews and stuff. Well, not knowing this tornado was coming, and the last thing he remembered, he was driving in front of the courthouse, and it actually picked his vehicle up, and he must have got knocked out or something, and he was actually ended up in just a parking lot with his vehicle on its side, and he was passed out and everything. I mean, when he woke up, he was there. He didn't know how he got there, so
Wow.
the tornado must have grabbed him. So yeah, and then it was just, I mean, it's just unreal. It's just it's something you'll never forget. Thank God they have warnings now. Tornadoes don't really bother me.
Yeah.
I work for the utility company, and I've been through a lot of storms and stuff, and I've seen tornadoes on the ground and stuff. It's just, I don't know. I'd rather be in the storms as to sit back and watch them.
Was that the most devastating tornado you've seen?
Yes. An F5 is actually one of the strongest tornadoes there is. And like I said, I never ever really seen the funnel cloud. It was when I heard the crackling and stuff, I just knew something was weird. All I can say is God give me the hint that, hey, get inside, get your family,
Mm-hmm.
and get them taken care of, and you know, um, get them undercover,
Yeah.
and that's what I did. I had no idea what was happening.
How long did it take for like the entire community to get back on its feet? Like, did it take time for people to go back to work?
There was people out of work for a long time. We lost, um, like I said, the one factory
Mm-hmm.
it was totally gone. That actually kind of closed down. The RCA plant was not hit real hard. We had an RCA plant at that time here in town, which was uh, had a lot of employees. Employed probably 75% of this town. Seriously, um, I'm going to say most of them were probably. It was a, you know, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, sad part of it was is a lot of the people who worked there didn't have any place to live. They had nowhere to go. I mean, it was their whole houses were destroyed. It took this community, and you know, you asked me how long. It was years. I mean, it was a long, long time before everything could get back what we want to call normal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it took several years to do that. You just don't build something like that back in a little bit of no time. Just like the railroad that came through town, the bridge had to cross that river. It actually took that bridge, the railroad bridge, lifted up and threw it into the river. They had to rebuild a railroad track across the river so the trains could
Wow.
actually go through.
Mm-hmm.
And that train was essential to our factories because it actually delivered supplies, took supplies at that point in time, and you know, it was just everything. The whole town was disrupted. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Oh.
Um, like I said, it's something I don't want to ever live through again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to deal with that ever again. But um, it's an experience that I don't want to say I it was a great experience to live through it, but it was an experience that um, not everybody gets to live through something like that in their lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was yeah, it was unbelievable, just unbelievable.
Well, thank you for taking your time to let me interview you today.
Not a problem.